Hello and good morning, everybody. Welcome to the November 10th, 2021 meeting of the Task Force for Reviewing the Connectivity and Technology Needs of Precision Agriculture in the United States. My name is Jesse Jackman. I'm the designated federal officer of the task force, and this is the final planned meeting for this initial term of the task force. I'd also want to announce that our deputy designated federal officers are also on. That is Stacy Ferraro and Elizabeth Kuttner of the FCC. And also just announcement that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on fcc.gov/live, and we will use that recording on the transcript for the minutes of this meeting, as we have been doing for all the meetings that have been for this task force. So with that, I will do a roll call. Dr. Michael Adeline, South Dakota State University. All right. Good morning. Seth Wonder from the Dakota Carrier Network. Seth? Seth, they join?
Here.
Oh, there you are. The Honorable Daryl Artho from Deaf Smith County, Texas.
Here.
Andy Bader, Fifth Estate Growers, LLC.
Good morning. Here.
Peter Brent, New Vision Farms.
Good morning, I'm present.
Hi, Peter. Chris Chin, Missouri Department of Agriculture.
I'm here.
Anthony Dillard, Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma.
I'm here.
David Goldman, SpaceX.
I'm here. Thanks.
Michael Gomes, Topcon Agriculture.
I'm here.
Daniel Liebfried from John Deere.
Good morning. Here.
Mike McCormick, Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation.
I'm here.
Jeff Pettit, representing the National Association of Tower Erectors.
Present.
Steve Vale, Nine Star Connect.
Here.
Chris McLean, the ex officio member from the United States Department of Agriculture.
Here.
Catherine Moyer, Pioneer Communications.
I'm here.
And finally, Task Force Chair Teddy Kelly from Land O'Lakes.
I am here.
All right, so I call this meeting to order as I did at the beginning, and Teddy, I'll hand that over to you.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our last meeting for 2021. I think it's been an interesting ride over the last 2 years. I'm glad we actually got a chance to meet one another at the beginning of kind of last year, but all these sessions have now been virtual. But despite the fact that we're not together face to face and have a chance to interact, I think everybody's done a really nice job of bringing us to this spot, right? I think the different working groups with your leadership and lots of in-depth discussions have brought up some really interesting considerations, some really in-depth analysis, and then some really valuable recommendations. And then as a task force, I really do appreciate everybody coming together here in the last 2 months to pull together the different working groups. And it's a difficult task, right? Because you have overlapping recommendations, you have lots of handoffs from one group to another. But despite all that, I think we got to a good spot where we have a solid document with a good executive summary, but some real depth behind it as far as what we see the future of precision agriculture to be in the United States. What are some of the needs? And with respect to broadband, what are some of the key considerations that need to be put in place, whether it's connectivity needs or whether it's funding and whatnot. So I thought we got to a good spot. So number one, thank you to everyone that really put forth a lot of effort. I know everybody has a day job and really kind of this is the gig on the side, but sometimes it feels a little more than just a side gig. So again, thank you for all of that. I do want to thank all the members from the FCC as well as the USDA for their support for the different working groups as well as the overall task force. I think their feedback, their guidance, and just the structure they put in place to get us to this point has been really phenomenal and really has produced some quality work. So I'm excited to go through this last meeting for this year and review some of the the latest sort of document and really kind of get it to a closure. So really the agenda for today is really simple. I think Jesse brought to kind of the meeting to order. We're doing some opening remarks. I'll turn it over to Catherine here in a second. And really the bulk of the meeting today and the meat of it is just to discuss the report. I'll pull up the report that was sent. I sent the very last version last night, which has had a really minor change in the appendix, but really it's the clean version from Sunday evening. I'll take some of the initial comments you might have, but there are some things we do need to discuss in the report itself. We'll start out with some of the minor changes that are not in the document today that I want to make sure everybody's aligned with as we go forward. And then there's one bigger issue to tackle, which is the this concept of symmetrical and how do we want to represent that in the document. And that's referenced in several places. So we'll have a discussion of how that should look like, and then there may be some edits to the document. So what we're going to do today is really have that discussion, and then I will take the opportunity to take a break. So we may not go all the way till 12:15. We may actually stop a little bit earlier, go back, make the edits just in the specific sections, make sure everybody's comfortable with it. And then when we come back together, whether it's 1:45 or a different time that we decide, we can have further discussion and then maybe even and then vote on the document itself. Again, the voting will probably be something that says as long as the document reflects the discussion we've had and these changes that we have agreed to make themselves into the documents, then we agree to it. And so we'll have that vote. And really, that'll be it for the day. So I don't really expect to be a really heavy day to use the full time. I think everybody will be delighted with that. But at the same time, I don't want to, the reason why we didn't make it a shorter meeting is kind of want to give ourselves ample time in case we need additional time for discussion or additional time for editing. So that will be sort of what we'll do today. And then from that, really, that will be it for this year. So light, I guess, a light agenda, but probably a lot of discussion. And I'm going to turn it over to Catherine from some initial remarks, and then Chris McLean. I see your hand raised up, so I will turn it over to you for a second as well. Go ahead, Catherine.
Thanks, Teddy. I appreciate it. I'm not going to add a whole bunch because I think you covered it really well. I would just also express my appreciation to the members of the task force, especially in light of doing this virtually. I think the lift was heavy, and I'm impressed with the final document that we've circulated. I'd also like to express my thanks to the staff at both the FCC and the USDA. I think your time was well spent, and I think we're going to get to a good place here at the end of today. And I really look forward to the discussion today. So that's it for me, Teddy. I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. Chris, I believe you had your hand up. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the task force members for their over all these months. I was the late joiner in January to replace former Administrator Roop, but your work has impressed me so much. It has been personally informative to me, has helped quite a bit as RUS work to launch the third round of our Reconnect funding, and so I hope you take a look at that as well. But most importantly, thank you. This was is an extraordinary effort, extraordinarily helpful, and on behalf of the Department of Agriculture and the Rural Utility Service, I want to thank each and every one of you.
Right. Thank you for those comments. Really appreciate that. It means a lot. So before we dive into the meat of the document and all that, any other initial comments from anyone else on the task force? Okay. So let me go ahead and share the document real quick. Okay, so I believe, like I said earlier, you've reviewed that. Hopefully the report came through last night, and even earlier in the weekend, last week. So there's many iterations of it. So that's good. I'm not going to go through the full detail of the documents, over 100 some pages, right? So when I talk about depth of analysis and really some good really considerations and thoughts that went into it, it really was there. And you know, I had the privilege to read it a couple of times and really impressed with a lot of the insights the different working groups provided. You know, since we talked last time, you know, the document has been cleaned up with, you know, all sorts of things, but really got to a spot where it's a little bit cleaner. There's a part one, which is the executive summary, part two, the data mapping working group. That's part three is accelerating broadband deployment for unserved agricultural lands. Part four, the examining the current and future needs of precision agriculture. and the 5 is the adoption and availability of high quality jobs. So, and then in the appendix, which was the late change from last night, it was just really just reformatting the agenda a little bit. I want to thank Jesse for taking the time to help us with that part of it. But really just has Appendix A is the task force members that are on this call. B is the working group members. Want to make sure we acknowledge them and the work they've done. A lot of the working groups had their charges in their part of the document that got moved into the appendix to make sure it was consistent. So the working group charges are found in Appendix C. And then any other resources that were used to be able to make some of the recommendations or the analysis are put into Appendix D. And then Appendix E, there were some recommendations for some other working groups in the future, or maybe even the continuation of this working group that should be able to take a look into some additional topics and potential issues. And so those were also put in Appendix E to keep it a little bit separate from what the recommendation for this task force might be. So that's really the structure of the document. Hopefully, like I said, you had a chance to review it. And there's some additional changes since the version you have now, and I'll review those here in a second. But before we go there, I wanted to open up to the task force to see if there's any major heartburns or concerns or issues you saw as you read through the document here in the last couple of weeks. Again, you can raise the hand in Teams. If you can't find the hand, you can just come off mute and accommodate. Honorable Dave Bartho.
Yes, sir. It's something that's more inclusive language on page 43. There's a mention of corn and soybean farmers. I'd just like to add the words sorghum, cotton, and wheat, because those guys use that same technology. And I just think that whenever we're talking USDA, we're talking to congressmen, those other commodity groups will be of value to have their some language of these other groups that are out there. So that's it.
Oh, that's great input. And actually, when we go to these minor changes that I have on the list, that's number 1. So they'll come back up again. Dan?
Yeah, I think that was in our working group section. I would just support Dale's recommendation there. No problem.
Okay, perfect. Right, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so let me switch to we'll start with the easier stuff, some of the minor tweaks, and then we'll go to the meatier stuff. Okay, so the first change is actually what Dale just brought up. On page 43, it was reading just large scale corn and soybean farmers, and we're going to change it to large scale corn, soybean, sorghum, cotton, and wheat farmers. So that was a little bit more inclusive, as Dale just explained. So hopefully, if anybody has an issue with that, let me know. But I think that was a good change. Okay, not seeing any there. Another change on page 45. It's just a smaller sentence. It said, Dr. Wesley Porter, University of Georgia, professor of precision agriculture and irrigation, shared his thoughts on workforce inefficiencies in broadacre farming with the group. It was a little bit unclear what the group was, so changed it to the Connectivity Needs Working Group. I don't think there's a big issue there. Okay. Page 56, currently the FCC defines advanced telecommunication as 25 megabits per second, so added the word capability. Communication capability is 25 megabits download and 3 megabits upload, which is an asymmetrical profile. Okay, and then a little bit further down, it says, the current infrastructure funding legislation passed by the U.S. Congress. So, by the time this was put together, this wasn't in place yet, but now it is. So it was a little bit of a change to reflect kind of the current state. So the infrastructure funding legislation passed by the U.S. Congress on November 5th, 2021. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021 fund, et cetera, et cetera. So it was just making sure that it was reflected more, the fact that bill had passed. So we wanted to make sure that it was called out that way. Okay. And then the next ones are pretty straightforward. There were citations that were mentioned throughout the document. So page 94, page 95, and page 103. And I believe some of the members of the FCC went through, and as they went through, they actually added the citation. So nothing changed in the actual use of the citation itself. It was just making sure that it was properly called out. So the 94, it was a case for rural broadband economics research service by the USDA. And so that was called out with a link to it. The next one on page 95, it was the blockchain to bring transparency to beef business. Again, call that out with a link to the Beef Magazine article. And then on page 103, it was added that telework may save U.S. jobs in COVID-19 downturn, especially among college graduates. And that was from the Pew Research Center. And so the link for that also is included in the document now on page 103. So that's the idea, is to include these citations in the overall document to make sure it's properly referenced. Any issues with those changes? Again, these changes are not in the document today, but they're proposed. So that the idea is to have them in. I believe that's it. Yes. Okay. Any questions, comments with these changes? Anybody opposed to making these changes? Okay, I'm not hearing none, and I'm not seeing. Oh, there's one hand. Dr. Adeline.
Teddy, I wondered. So with the addition of corn, and it's not an objection to corn, soybean, cotton, wheat. But do we reference the livestock industry, or do we just talk about beef and not talk about hogs? And so using soybeans, so on, that's quite an expansive list. Certainly, our folks in the livestock industry would appreciate the broader ask, if you will. But that's just the thought.
There is a reference to livestock later, but I thought it was. I just wanted to make sure. So this was the section just on. Oops, sorry, I have it on the. Apologize for the. There's a section on row crop and broadacre. So this is where we're making that specific change. But then later on, there's a whole section on livestock itself.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And specialty crops and more. I think the team did. That's why it goes really deep. Okay. All right. So we will add those additions and modifications to the document. Okay. Now getting to the larger part of our conversation is this concept of symmetrical, and it's referenced in several places, right? So what I will do is I'll go through where it's mentioned and you can get the feel for it. And then what I would love to do is have a discussion of how we should portray it. And then we can make the updates there. So on page 6, symmetrical upload download should only be considered for terrestrial wireline, as symmetrical standards are technically impractical for wireless technologies. These offer fiscal efficiency, superior environmental practice, and responsible resource allocation, leading to higher yields of safe, wholesome, and sustainable food, fiber, fauna, and fuel products. The suggestion is not to drive a rigid symmetrical standard, but rather to raise the standard on both ends significantly and recognize the uplink capacity is not inferior to downlink needs. So that's on page 6, and that's one we had talked about in the past. Page 21, it says specific targets should be tailored to specific use cases. Examples given: some use cases may require symmetric speeds, whereas others benefit from higher allocation to download. Ensure that federal agencies use the same threshold for establishing what is considered broadband service, what is considered to be broadband service, including nearly symmetrical service, and ensure all support mechanisms and incentives. So we talked a little bit about that as well, this idea of nearly symmetrical. Page 23, the FCC should strengthen policies that require auction bidders to show the long-term sustainability and scalability, including nearly symmetrical service of their proposed networks. So nearly symmetrical comes up again. Page 55, this practice requires bandwidth similar to a farmhouse where a symmetrical profile to upload and download significant amounts of data is necessary. So in this case, we say symmetrical. Page 56, the ag community requires both broadband and narrowband connectivity. Initially, there are 2 types of broadband coverage that are necessary to increase the adoption of precision agriculture equipment and practices: low-speed, broad, asymmetrical coverage, and high-speed, targeted symmetrical coverage. These 2 connectivity profiles work together to enable sensor data aggregation fused with decision support systems that can use commands in the field, providing for detailed data gathering initial automation capabilities. Currently, the FC defines telecommunication as 25 megabits per second download, 3 megabits per second upload, which is an asymmetrical profile. The current infrastructure funding legislation in the U.S. Congress, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021, would fund broadband at 120 megabits per second for download and upload, respectively. Symmetrical download and upload should only be considered for terrestrial wireline network, as symmetrical standards are technically impractical for wireless technologies. So that's yet another way of spinning it. We believe that within 5 years, the minimum bandwidth needs for agriculture producers will be 1 gigabit per second symmetrical speeds to core facilities typically served via wireline. Page 76, and I apologize I'm going through all of them, but I wanted to make sure you get the feel for like how we need to get to a common language here. Current and future next generation precision agriculture technologies, however, require services that allow for greater upload of collected data. As the volumes of data to manage agricultural production increase, higher speeds will likely be necessary, requiring at or near symmetrical data flows with a better balance of download and upload speeds and reliability. That one is, again, near symmetrical. This other one, data network symmetry. Agriculture production utilizes both downstream and upstream networking. Implementation of a network that provides download and upload capacity symmetrically or at near symmetrical level is critical to precision agriculture adoption. Page 84, at or near symmetry with service with upload and download speed approximately equal is vital to long-term sustainability of the industry of agriculture. 84, 85, the world of digital and precision agriculture and the Internet of Things or Internet of Food is a world of two-way communication requiring both volume and frequency with low latency achievable only through at or near symmetrical service levels. Page 85, in 2020 and beyond, the businesses are becoming increasingly dependent not only on connectivity, but on internet service at speeds with low latency enabled by or a near symmetrical service to support full cloud-based access and business decision-making. And kind of getting near in the end here, page 90, these stationary and non-stationary assets perform work functions and rely increasingly on high-capacity fixed and mobile broadband connectivity for data traffic communication or at near symmetrical level. And page 91, there, federal broadband policy should address the need for bidirectional or at near symmetrical connectivity on the farm. So these are all the areas where the word symmetry comes up and how we've talked about it. So what I wanted to do is we can, I can go, like the idea is when we take a break, we can go back and update all these areas where symmetry comes up. But the question is going to be, what are the concepts we want to align on? So I pulled out some things, and this is for discussion. So this is by no means saying this is what it should be. There's three kind of buckets that I found. One is this idea of the allocating funding. And should we say, allocate funding for broadband infrastructure to enable broadband connectivity over a range of technologies, both terrestrial and non-terrestrial support connectivity required. So, the idea is there's connectivity both happening, both terrestrial and non-terrestrial. So that both should be funded. Kind of have that language where it makes sense. The suggestion, there was another one that said the suggestion not to drive a rigid symmetrical standard, but rather to raise the standard on both ends significantly and recognize the uplink capacity is not inferior to download link needs. So that was, I read that a second ago. I thought that was an interesting way to put it as well. And then the third one is really the funding aspect of it. Minimum performance characteristics for funding should be set at least 100 megabits per second download and 20 megabits per second upload, while these standards should continue to be pushed at higher levels over time where practical to meet the needs of precision agriculture. So again, these are just throwing some out there for conversation here. Should we have language that's reflects these three themes, and or do you want to change it, or what are some thoughts from the group? Michael Gomes.
Thanks, Teddy. I appreciate what you've got there. I think there's two pieces that you also you missed. One was on page 31, recommendation number C talks about a nearly symmetrical service standard, and on page 32, recommendation number E talks about scalability, including nearly symmetrical service. And so I'm with you on this, and I think that this has been an important and an important concept kind of throughout the document. And so in my thinking is it's really simple. It's just in that my big hang up is mostly around just simply the phrase asymmetrical standards are technically impractical for wireless technologies. And so my thinking is if we would remove just that phrase from the executive summary, it's very consistent throughout the entire document.
Okay. So a couple of things there. Let me, what were the page 31 you said?
Yeah, 31, C, 31 and 32. It's 31C and 32E, recommendation E, I believe, because they're both in that tables of recommendations.
Okay. Yep.
And so I get it. I guess the thing that just sticks out to me is this phrase in the executive summary. And so if we would remove that simple phrase about technical impracticability, about them being technically impractical, to me, then the whole document lines up and is very consistent.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to find it in the executive summary. Which page is it on the executive summary?
On the executive summary, it's on page 6.
Okay.
Halfway up in item 3A.
Okay. Thoughts from others in the group? Andy?
Thanks, Teddy. I actually landed on this same set of sentences as well, but I do have a different these modems and have watched our communications technology evolve over the years. And so I wondered whether we could leave it as is, but merely change it to say currently technically impractical, because I think these are situations that will be changing and can be fixed in the future, but there's pushback right now that there are current limitations.
So you're saying currently impractical. Okay, that's a good suggestion. Jesse, did you have a comment?
Yeah, Teddy, on the report that Michael was pointing out those pages, I think it's in the deployment section. If you recall, there's the table, and then there's the table kind of below it that that shows where those recommendations fit in within the charges. So I think that's maybe just something to note, that we should keep that consistent. There's the kind of table up front in that section, and then there's the table below it. So it's just making sure that those are consistent. So I think, Michael, that is what you're pointing out. So I think those points where you talk about page 31, where there's references to symmetry, I think those appear earlier as well. And so they hopefully are captured in the document that Teddy's showing.
Okay.
I wasn't debating that. I would just, to me, there were two other elements where the recommendations were, and they were symmetrical. That's all.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I just, I wanted to, it wasn't I think it was just something that was repeated above in the document.
Yeah, so we'll make sure it stays consistent. That's a good point. Dan?
Yeah, I think the comments so far are good. I mean, if we take a step back as a full task force here, thinking about what our intention is here, I think is important. And the conversations through our working group and the conversations we've had over the course of the last 2 years on this subject, the intention is, number one, we need to raise the bar, and we need to raise it significantly, and we shouldn't leave the uplink side behind. So, and that's been recognized in the most recent infrastructure bill. So, I think we number one need to at least reinforce what's in the current infrastructure bill to say, it's a minimum of 100 up and or 100 down and 20 up. Mm-hmm. The broader point here that I think the team's struggling with is we want to continuously raise the bar beyond the work of this group. And I do think it's important for us to push that, whether it's through symmetrical or just language that supports that effort, to say we shouldn't stand stand back and say 120 up is good forever, but it's good for now. So I hopefully that helps to at least clarify, I think, what the intention of what we're trying to push in this area is.
Yeah.
Maybe the other thing I'd offer, just for consistency, Teddy, if you go back to that brief changes that we reviewed before we got into this discussion, we talked about the infrastructure bill getting passed. We'll also need to synchronize that, I think, in section 3 of the executive summary, because we talk about it being in process. So I just from a consistency standpoint, wherever we land on this, we would also want to talk about how that was recently passed.
Okay, good
Just
comment.
another note.
Yeah, good comment there. So we'll make sure we update that part of it. So I think what you're saying, Dan, and I like it. It's the idea is we want to raise the bar significantly, right? So that's the point. And obviously the minimum of 100 and down, 20 up that's the minimum. I mean, and we support that. However, what we want to do is continue to raise specifically even on the upload side to make sure, because the need is going to be there. And we could use the word near symmetrical, or try to achieve somewhere where it's near symmetrical or something like that.
Yep.
Would that be kind of what you had in mind?
Yeah, and maybe the other thing, I think the risk we run with these statements throughout is we run the risk of making a recommendation to say raise the bar to this level.
Yeah.
And then it feels like there's other recommendations that are throughout the body of the document that say that's not good enough. We need to actually recommend this as well. And once those get in conflict, I think that's where we open it up. We open the implementation team and the FCC and others up to letting them interpret what our meaning was. So I think that's why it's important for us to, at least where it's coming across as a firm recommendation across the course of the document, to go to whether it's a gig up and a gig down, or 100 or nearly symmetrical. We maybe need to soften that as a recommendation, but use it as a reinforcing point to continuously raise the bar beyond this first point. But I am definitely interested in David Goldman's perspective. I know he's been passionate about this throughout.
Yep. Go ahead, David.
Well, now I'm embarrassed because I think I strongly align with Dan's comments, but he said it better than I could. So all I'm going to do is repeat what he said in a worse way. But one of the points on for wireless in particular is a lot of the spectrum is not actually allocated symmetrically, and so whether we talk about technically practical or not, is to me is almost beside the point. It's actually impossible under the current allocations. And then I started thinking about does that mean that we need to, if we're going to be pushing symmetrical so hard, that we need to be saying the FCC needs to allocate spectrum more symmetrically. But I actually think that probably ends up that's a whole other can of worms. I don't think almost anybody would support that. So it does kind of create a conflict there to be. I think Dan's suggestion is actually the way to kind of thread the needle on all of it. We had talked in previous meetings about using the terms like nearly symmetrical to kind of soften it. I think that was a fair. I'm not sure how many people actually love that as a term in itself, but I thought it was a fair compromise between the different positions. Because the problem is also when you go completely just with the symmetrical and they have this hard line, is different use cases have different needs. And I think if it's symmetrical is going to limit you to very, very particular technology that has trade-offs, which can be great. But, and I've raised this before, so I don't want to belabor it, but it is the most expensive and slowest deployment. So if you're talking about that we have financial constraints and we have speed deployment needs, I think just saying a hard symmetrical line, I think ignores some of the nuance and the different use cases that are out there. But again, I know we've talked about all this before, so I'm kind of repeating myself and I don't want to belabor it. I really mostly just want to align myself with what Dan said.
Got it. No, good comments. I think the point is to like idea. I just put some words down. It won't be like this, but raise the bar significantly on both ends and continue to push upload speeds for precision agriculture towards near symmetry or near symmetrical, something like that. But the idea is 120 is the minimum. We need to continue to push higher than that, right? Both ends, not just the upload side, but both ends, but particularly not leave upload behind, and make sure that we strive for getting closer to symmetry if possible, something like that.
And keeping us away again from continuously bringing it back up and making it seem like a recommendation that's in conflict.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be the other key piece. I don't think I like the actual utilization of the narrative throughout. It continuously reinforces. What I don't like is if it could be interpreted as conflicting recommendations, and we might not really, to David's point, we might be surprised with the unintended consequences of picking the symmetrical as the point of standard at this point in time, or even near symmetrical for that matter.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good narrative. So, Dr. Adeline?
Yeah, and I certainly agree with what's been said. Knowing this discussion, I went and read a bunch of research, and as I understand it, it really is the power of the device that's pushing the upload. So in a matter of fact, the farm ranch location would have the devices to be symmetrical. And maybe we need to look at some slight wording that would add that piece to what you're saying, Teddy, is that we're looking at the home location being a symmetrical, and that you could have asymmetrical in the field, where most likely the devices, whether that be in the combine, the tractor, would not necessarily have the power to push a large upload to the cloud while they're moving through. So that's something to think about. I really like your idea of consistency through the document. We want to reinforce the message, but it needs to be consistent. Otherwise it gets lost. And so I think that's very appropriate. That's my thought.
Okay. No, thank you. That's good. Other thoughts from the group? Quiet. This is good. Makes job easier. All right. The goal is having that consistency throughout the document, right? So it feels like one recommendation, and it's good that it comes up many times because that continues to reinforce the fact that this is important, and this is one of the key recommendations from this task force. So here's my suggestion. I'm glad Michael caught the page 31 and 32. So we'll make sure we add those pages into this list, because we don't have that. It should be somewhere around here to capture the language that's in there today. And then I'm going to go back and look at all these pages and start to put that common narrative wherever this concept of symmetrical comes up, right? So on page 36, 6, 21, et cetera. And again, the idea is we want to allocate funding towards broadband for precision agriculture, both terrestrial and non-terrestrial. We want the minimum performance is set 100 download, 20 megabits upload, but that's not enough. We want to continue to raise that both ends and significantly push even on the upload side, because striving towards the near symmetrical or whatever is important. So we'll have better wording for that. But the idea is to go through and each of these sections, update it so it has a common narrative throughout, right? And then when we get back together later today, I'll have the same document with changes turned on so you can see what the new language looks like for each of these sections and see if we have that consistency across. And we can make edits to each portion if we need to. Will that work for everyone? Because otherwise we'll sit here and try to wordsmith together for another hour. I don't think that'll be painful for everyone.
I support the recommended approach, Teddy. Appreciate you doing the lift.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, so let's do this. It's 9:41 Central, 10:41 Eastern. Let's break. And Jesse, when do you think is a good time to come back? Like after lunch or before lunch?
Hey, Teddy, what do you think of the time that needed to go back and put these edits in for you?
About an hour and a half.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I defer to you. We have the quote room reserved all day. So as long as you need, if you want to give a tentative time, that's fine as well. And you can kind of email everybody to give an update in an hour or so, or
yeah, let's do that. Since we have the whole day reserved, like you said, let's do this. Let's break now. We'll go back and make the edits. I will email this out to everybody else so you have a chance to look at it, right? So that way you're not on the spot. And then let's come back at how about 1 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. And then we'll take a look at it and see if we're all in line with it. And then if so, we'll vote on it, and that'll be the end of it. Will that work for everyone? Oh, Chris says we have a meeting. Okay, so we can get back together at 2 p.m.
Oh, I was just saying, I see Christian and Dale Artho have their hands up.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I have a scheduled meeting during our scheduled lunch break, so I can't really move it last minute like that. So if we could stick to either before the lunch break or after the lunch break, it would work better for me. But don't hold anything up just because of me either.
No, that's okay. We can go back to kind of where we on the schedule says we're going to get back together at 1:45 p.m. Eastern. Chris, will that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that'd be great. That's 12:45 Central Time. That's perfect.
Okay. Dale, did you have a conflict?
No, sir, I'm good.
Okay. All right, so let's do this. Let's break now.
Dr. Adeline has his hand up as well.
I can't see them.
Oh, now it's down. No, okay.
Okay. I was gonna say, I thought I put it down.
Okay, yeah, no, we're all still getting used to these hand raising features.
No, yeah, there's a little bit of a delay. Okay, so let's break now, and then what we'll do is we'll get back together at 1:45 p.m. Eastern, 12:45 p.m. Central. And in the meantime, though, within the next hour or so, you'll receive an updated document for the different sections where the language will be changed. That way you have plenty of time to take a look at it, think about it, and we'll get back together at that time. All right, awesome. Thanks, everyone. See you in a little bit.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I call the meeting to order again, just coming out of break. And just want to let everybody know that everybody is online and don't have Chris McLean at the moment, but we'll announce when he rejoins. So with that, I will just head it right back over to Teddy. Teddy?
Great. Thank you, Jesse. Welcome back, everyone. And we had a good, decent-sized break there. In the meantime, we're able also to update the document that we discussed this morning with some of the changes around the terminology of symmetrical. Sent that out to the team for review. And hopefully now what we'll do now is just kind of quickly go through that document, through those points we reviewed this morning. Make sure everybody's okay with the language that's been modified. That will eventually make itself into the document. And then from that, if we'll check for other comments or questions or whatnot, and then we'll take a vote. So before we get started, I see Andy, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Teddy. I have a question with regard to sort of the overall context here. In our edits here, when we talk about terrestrial wireline networks, is that considered to be in some ways public networks? Because our document also discusses the potential requirement or use of private networks on farms, which might actually be fed from farmhouses, farm buildings that do have wired symmetrical service. And I'm just not entirely clear that we're making any sort of delineation here.
It's a good question. I think, so the question is it just public, or is it we also considering private as well, right?
Correct.
I don't know. Thoughts from the team? I don't see any hands up. So let me give it a shot. So I think, well, Dale?
If what Andy's asking includes the ability of Bill and Kathy Arthur Farms to go and get funding from grants or whatever to develop a network on my farm, then yeah, I would include it. But if it doesn't include that ability to have access to capital to build such a infrastructure on my own private property, then I think I'd be opposed to it. I don't know which way that works. I'm just asking the question.
Catherine?
I mean, I guess technically, Dale, you could go in and participate in an FCC auction if you dotted your I's and crossed your T's and did everything you needed to do to participate. So then you would be eligible, and then you would fall under those things. But in my opinion, these are what we're talking about are infrastructure providers, not the private networks on the other side of it. I mean, I get the point that Andy makes that we do talk about, private networks on farmland as well. But I think most of these things where we're talking about symmetry and talking about eligibility for funding and places that they're supposed to build to or speeds that they're supposed to build to is all aimed at the public sector.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do with also requesting funding, right? If you're going to request funding or participate in an auction with the FCC or other agencies, so you're receiving funding, so therefore this is what you're supposed to provide in return. If it's private, I think that's more handled whichever way the private provider wants to, or if you're private yourself, however you want to do it. Dr. Adeline?
So I viewed the nuance in that discussion is that more funding from the USDA in grants to operations to build out. And it may be that they go together with other, the rancher down the road or whatever, but I do view it as private in that fashion, but not to participate in an FCC auction. Okay, really looking at the USDA to provide funding in that short operation.
Thank you. Andy, does that answer your question? Is there any changes we need to make as a result of that in your mind?
I guess I'm still a little concerned. I did have one thought, and that would be to maybe, I guess I'm in an adding language mode today, and that would be to add the notion of broad application. Symmetrical standards are currently technically impractical for broad application of wireless technologies. I think that, or something similar to that, would make it clear that we're talking about public networks that we think are the people and the entities that are challenged right now, not necessarily Dale or myself, who potentially on our own farms could build out our own 5G network and provide high-speed capacity.
Okay.
And Andy, I think if you did that, I mean, you're providing it to yourself for your own operations, correct?
Correct.
So you're not providing it to others, to other end users, to other customers. And so far as I'm concerned, you can build whatever you want. You know, you can build whatever speed you want.
I think, Catherine, I think what I guess I'm being slightly contentious here because I'm interested in, okay, if we're thinking about spectrum allocations and as Dale pointed out, if we're thinking about grants to build things on farms where farmers are potentially in conjunction with other farmers build private networks that are high speed, or maybe even research. I could see situations on research farms at land grant universities where they want to build high-speed networks for phenomics research, for example. So I want to be careful that we're not inferring that it's a bridge too far everywhere. That I think we should make it clear that we're inferring that it's a bridge too far for lack of a better term, the big guys, the big carriers who provide it across America right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and the place to look at that, I think we can jump in the document. Actually, the first page 6, I think, is where the place where we would have that. So let me pull that up, and maybe we can make the adjustment right then and then. Okay. So I think, Andy, you're saying somewhere in here in the first sentence, right?
Correct.
Symmetrical. Somewhere here, maybe.
Probably after the 4, right? Considered for broad terrestrial wireline networks. Is that what you're thinking, Andy?
Yeah, I think that's right. It probably could go anywhere, but I'm just trying to make sure that we don't eliminate the ability for people to build private, smaller networks, get funding, get spectrum, et cetera.
How about that? Okay. I believe that covers the point. I know there's also another part in the document where that comes up, so I'll make sure to get that updated as well. I mean, that same language is from a recommendation from later in the document, so we'll make sure there's consistency. Okay, so kind of going through this, page 6, it was kind of a little bit of the conversation right at the beginning. So it's at the beginning, said at this time, symmetrical application, symmetrical upload download should be considered for broad application terrestrial wireline networks, as symmetrical standards are currently technically impractical for wireless technology. So I believe this was the change that was suggested earlier, so made that change to reflect the conversation earlier. Any issues here? Okay, see no hands up. Moving down to page 21. Oh, get that out of there. The first, there's 2 pieces on page 21. On the first one, there was no real changes made. Specific targets should be tailored to specific use cases. Example given, some use cases may require symmetrical speeds, whereas other benefits from higher allocation to download. So that seemed like it was a good statement saying sometimes symmetrical is needed. So other than just some minor grammatical changes, no changes here. On the second sentence, that's where there are some changes there with some language that kind of discuss what we discussed earlier. So ensure that federal agencies use the same threshold for establishing what is considered to be broadband service, and in parentheses, that means is greater network capacity with a better balance between upload and download speeds, and align all support mechanisms and incentives. Period. Okay. How does that look for everybody? This is the language of that symmetrical is being replaced a little bit with this, have a network that has greater capacity, so both greater upload and download speeds with a better balance between upload and download. This kind of like seemed like a good language to use that was reflecting our intentions.
Yeah, it seems very reflective, I believe.
Okay. Okay, moving down to page 23, you'll start to see the same thing come up over and over again. The FCC should strengthen policies that require auction bidders to show the long-term sustainability and scalability of their proposed networks, recognizing the need to raise the bar significantly on both upload and download speeds. That's again, raising everything. Page 31. Again, if you have a question, just raise a hand up or just come off mute. Either is okay. I'm going to continue going. Page 31. Ensure that federal agencies use the same threshold for establishing what is considered to be broadband service. So this is the same. So again, this was a table that's on page 31, but the recommendation was actually on page 21. So both this one and the next one are just copy and paste of the previous one, right? So just to make sure that we have consistency in the language there, and that's Michael Gomes. That's what you brought up, and good catch there. So we made sure that we didn't get anywhere. Made sure we had consistency around the language we were using. Okay, moving to page 55. Change to this practice requires bandwidth like a farmhouse, where download and upload speeds are necessary to transmit significant amounts of data. Therefore, it is critical to raise the bar significantly on both ends, where a better balance between download and upload speeds. With a better balance between download and upload speeds. I have a hard time reading it in with all the changes on, but I need to see what we changed there. Any questions on that one? Okay. Okay, page 56. There was quite a bit of content there. The agriculture community requires both broadband and narrowband connectivity. Initially, there are two types of broadband coverage that are necessary to increase the adoption of precision agriculture equipment and practices. There was the designation of asymmetrical and symmetrical in here. It made it confusing for the rest. So again, we'd love to get some feedback here, but remove those words, because ultimately I think what we're trying to say is low speed broad coverage and high speed targeted coverage. And then the language still continued to work afterwards. These two connectivity profiles work together to enable sensor data aggregation fused with decision support systems that can issue commands into the field, providing for detailed data gathering and initial automation capabilities. And then the rest of it goes on to talk about the 25 megabits per second and the 3 megabits per second upload from the FCC, which is an asymmetrical profile. There's no issues there. Current infrastructure funding legislation in the U.S., the Infrastructure Investment Jobs would fund broadband at 120 megabits per second for download and upload respectively. And then here's the language from the executive summary. At least this was in the lower part of the document. This time, symmetrical download upload should only be considered for broad. This is where we can make the change here. Application terrestrial wireline networks, as symmetrical standards are currently technically impractical for wireless technologies. Questions? Seeing none. Okay, moving on to page 72. Oh, Dr. Adeline?
So Teddy, on that low speed, I was wondering if you could low speed, broad coverage, but high speed, high throughput coverage, because you're really talking about data upload.
How about high throughput and targeted? So then it's both. It's high and focused.
Yeah.
Like that?
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. Okay, good suggestion. Moving to page 72, we believe that within 5 years, the minimum bandwidth needs for agriculture producers will be 1 gigabit per second upload and download speeds to core facilities typically served via wireline. So again, here on this one was It could be symmetrical, may not be symmetrical, but the idea is, we're getting closer to that 1 gigabit per second. So seem like this language would keep it sort of with our intent.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the intent of continuously both kind of laying out the future, but it's not a firm recommendation that other things should be tied to it in the near term. So this is Dan. I would agree with the language as stated.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Okay, moving to page 76. Current and future next generation precision agriculture technologies, however, require services that allow for greater upload of collected data. As the volumes of data to manage agriculture production increase, higher speeds will likely be necessary, requiring greater data flows with a better balance of download and upload speeds and reliability. So again, this is greater. There'll be greater data speeds, so therefore we need this. So hopefully this language works as well. Again, the use of better balance of download and upload speeds, this is where that came from. I thought this was a really good way to put it, and kind of expresses our sentiment. Okay, in that same page, a little bit further, there was a section called Data Network Symmetry. Change that to Data Network Download Upload Capacity. Agriculture production utilizes both downstream and upstream networking. Implementation of a network that provides greater network capacity with a better balance between download and upload speed should be in there, is critical to precision agriculture adoption. Any question on that one? Okay. Moving on to page 84, again, kind of using that same language, implementation of a network that provides greater capacity with a better balance between download and upload service is vital to long-term sustainability of the industry of agriculture. Again, using that same language. Moving to pages 84, 85, the world of digital and precision agriculture and the Internet of Things and Internet of Food is a world of two-way communication requiring both volume and frequency with low latency achievable only through greater network capacity with a better balance between upload and download service levels. Okay, moving to page 85, it's in 2020, change that to in 2021 and beyond. For this year, businesses are becoming increasingly dependent not only on connectivity, but on internet service at speeds with low latency, enabled by greater network capacity and better balance between upload and download service to support full cloud-based access and business decision-making. Okay, page 90. These stationary and non-stationary assets perform work functions and rely increasingly on high-capacity fixed and mobile broadband connectivity for data traffic communication with better balance between upload and download levels. Oh, Michael Gomes.
Hey, Teddy, on that last one, how about to support full cloud-based access, storage and decision-making, because people are using the cloud-based services and the cloud-based systems for storage. And so you've got to have the ability to reach and safely store.
Yep, it's a great suggestion. Okay. Page 90, these stationary and non-stationary assets perform work functions and rely increasingly on high-capacity fixed and mobile broadband connectivity for data traffic communication with better balance between upload and download levels. Okay, and then page 91, see why there's a there, but federal broadband policies should address the need for bidirectional communication and greater speed with a better balance between download and upload levels. I think it's therefore, but I'll check to make sure that that's correct. Okay. Dr. Adeline, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I do have a comment, Teddy. So we're talking about symmetrical as well as asymmetrical, and there's a lot about that. But we don't talk about reliability. And if you have this massive download capability and you start a process and it dies on you, that's not a good situation. If you look at adoption, whenever you have that unreliability, it can kill adoption. And so I wondered if in the policy statement here, we could squeak in something about reliability or uptime, something of that nature in that.
Yeah, so how about right here? So broadband policy should address the need for bidirectional communication, reliability, and greater speed with a better balance between download and upload levels.
Looks good.
Jesse, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just quickly want to note that there is some discussion about reliability in other places of the document. Not saying doesn't make sense to put it there, but there are some other places if you look through the version.
There are. But in this, I think it's good to reinforce it here as well. But yes, thank you. Okay. Those are all the changes. There is Jesse also pointed to me there's one spot in the appendix where there was reference to symmetrical, especially in the recommendation for future groups. So we'll make sure that that one also reflects the same type of language that we see here. So with that, any other comments or questions or concerns from anybody else on the task force? Andy?
So I read this again cover to cover this morning, and I picked up what I thought were a few footnotes here and there that disappeared as we've been editing this document, and I wondered whether those will be reinserted going forward. Whether someone's checking that kind of small stuff.
Yeah, good point. A lot of that should be in the appendix. I know that the appendix is moving here and there. And the key was, depending on the footnote and how extensive it was, some of that is moving into the reference section of the appendix. But good point. We'll just have to make sure we go back and make sure that all those things are there. Make a note. Dr. Adeline?
So Teddy, just a small thing on page 4 of the executive summary, second paragraph or second sentence, it says broadband is the foundation element that is a force multiplier for all other issues. And it seems like it's one of the few places we use a military term, force multiplier. And as I read that, I had a son that served 2 tours. I know what force multiplier is. And I just thought, does it really add? So if you struck that sentence, I think the next one filled in really well. So it's just a thought.
Yeah, no, it's a good suggestion. I like that. No reason, especially in the executive summary, no reason to make it more confusing. Okay, let me add it in here. So make sure that we have it.
That Jesse, that same language also appears in the conclusion.
Okay.
The conclusion of the executive summary, so page 9 of the document.
Okay. strike that. Let's accept these things. Sorry, I'm just putting it in so that we capture it now and then. Just strike this sentence, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then Jesse, you said it comes up again in the conclusion.
The conclusion of the executive summary. So
Yeah.
I just did a control F, found it on page 9.
Okay. Got it. Sorry, I'm doing all this so we can vote and say this is what we're changing. Okay. Hope that captures it. Any other general comments, questions, concerns? Okay. So seeing none, Michael Gomes?
Yeah, I had one and I've been kind of going back and forth on it. On page 14, where we talk about primary and secondary criteria,
Mm-hmm.
I had considered one that would probably be under secondary, but it could be primary, and it would be structure has the primary function to house animals or grain storage. And I wasn't sure if it added or if it's already covered because it has agricultural purposes for taxes and electricity. It would probably be a primary because if it's got, you know, and so that's where I'm just, because one of the things that we haven't done is I was thinking about the grain storage and any sort of barn that houses animals. And if it's got electricity and water, right, that's what I was thinking about. But I certainly up to discussion. I'm not trying to complicate things at the 11th hour.
No worries. Dr. Adeline, maybe I'll lean on you on this one. It's kind of part of the data mapping one. So to add that Go ahead.
So we did discuss that, and we thought after having a discussion that if it's taxed as agricultural purpose, that it would cover grain handling facilities, livestock facilities, and things like that. So we didn't want to enumerate, you know, because it could be an extensive list. So we were thinking that this would capture it by saying that if it was taxed, and certainly the grain bins or grain handling facility with a leg would be covered under that. At least that was our discussion.
Okay, asked and answered. I'd consider it moot. You know, I mean, they addressed it, and I figured that the tax purposes might. That's not my area of expertise. It was their part of the report, but I just thought that because we're talking so much about animals and grain storage, that it would be worth at least asking about.
Yep.
Thanks.
So Michael Gomes, are you okay to leave it the way it is right now?
Yes, sir, I am. Leave it the way it is. I don't need to add anything.
Okay. All right. So any other, Andy?
So I have a process question here. I've been in a conversation with a different area of our culture, and a researcher pointed out that the best way to determine whether a document that's been produced is accurate or not is to put it out for public review, because inevitably someone comes out of the woodwork and asks a question or provides a data point that you didn't consider. And so with regard to this document, which we've all put a lot of work in and is totally phenomenal, and I was thinking this morning, okay, so this will now be ostensibly in a few days a public document, but we may well start to get some questions and requests for clarifications. And I'm wondering what's going to be our status on handling those, particularly because there may well be an entirely different task force going over this. This is our last meeting or close to the last meeting. How are we going to handle those inquiries and those questions collectively?
It's a good process question, Andy. Jesse, do you have some thoughts on kind of how this has been done in the past with other task forces, and what's an effective way to deal with feedback that comes from folks reviewing the document?
That's a good question. I don't have an immediate answer, but definitely something I would take back to my colleagues. But I think, as Andy pointed out, in the coming days, this document will be posted on the FCC's website, so it'll become a public document. It's not necessarily one that we officially put out for comment, like a notice of proposed rulemaking that's adopted by the commission or something like that. But the meetings of the task force as we go forward will continue to be open to the public. So there will be opportunities for maybe the public to ask questions, or we can take questions, and there's ways to do that. When these are when Federal Advisory Committee meetings are in person, there's usually a room people can go in, almost just raise their hand and ask a question. Given that it's virtual, that process has been more complicated, but there are ways that we can take input from the public that could help the task force kind of look at different questions or things that they've looked at before. And so, yeah, in terms of process, I don't think there's anything so formal, but yeah, it's, these meetings are open, and there's ways for the public to ask questions about the report and kind of what the direction that the task force might be going in certain things or other things to consider.
So, and then the other thing I was thinking is if obviously whether it's the FCC or the USDA, as you receive questions or inquiries about the report itself, there is a task force that will continue on precision agriculture. So, and maybe it's not the makeup of this team here, but whatever team comes together next can certainly take that as input for things to look into further or clarify or bring back up what we recommended here, and see what additional thoughts they might have to be able to continue to refine this. Jesse, I think that's also another way to continue to update this, right? Or keep it alive in a way.
Yeah, that's right. And under the statute that directed the commission to set up this task force, these reports, or at least some of the reports, are due annually. So these are annual reports. In particular, the report on the connectivity needs of precision agriculture and the mapping in terms of kind of assessing where connectivity is available and where it is not. So there are things in the statute that require the task force to report annually. So those will continue to happen throughout the task force.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Andy, I was going to ask you a question, but go ahead.
No, I dropped my hand. I'm good with that answer, as long as we've anticipated that we may receive questions and there's some semblance of a process to address them.
Yep. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other hands up. So here's what I'm thinking. So obviously you have the PDF document that was sent, and that's what I have here in front of us. All of you have had a chance to review. We have the changes that we reviewed this morning on a few pages, and I think for the most part, I think we were good with it. Dale had a suggestion there that was in it, and then this force multiplier was here, so we've included those changes coming in. And then obviously we reviewed this document on the wherever symmetry comes up. And, we kind of went through all those changes. So these two Word documents, the changes in them are what's going to make it back into the main documents, and also the footnotes. Andy, good suggestion to make sure that we go back and all the footnotes that were there are captured either in the appendix or in the footnote of the document itself. We'll make sure that alignment is there. So with that, I think we're at a spot where we can vote for this document and see if we're all aligned on, kind of passing it on. And then obviously from this, what I would do is once we have a final version, I will circulate it again with this team for your awareness, but we'll also be sending it over to the chair of the FCC as well as the secretary of the USDA. And then it will be made public. So that would be sort of the next steps in it. And Jesse will give us maybe a little bit more color into that. But before we get to that part, would love to take a vote at this point. And the best way to do this, because it's virtual, I think, is Jesse, you'll have to call out each person and see sort of where they stand, right? And if they want to vote yes or no for this document.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that's what we've done before. So yeah, I will just go ahead and I'll go in order here that I have. So Dr. Michael Adeline?
Yes.
Seth Arndorfer?
Yes.
The Honorable Daryl Artho?
Yes.
Andy Bader?
Yes.
Peter Brent?
Yes.
Thanks, Ben. Chris Chin?
Yes.
Anthony Dillard?
Yes.
David Goldman?
Yes.
Michael Gomes?
Yes.
Daniel Leibfried?
Yes.
Mike McCormick?
Yes.
Jeff Pettit?
Yes.
Steve Vale?
Yes.
Catherine Moyer?
Yes.
And Teddy McKelly?
Yes. Okay. With that, we have unanimous approval, and so we'll move forward with the document, and it will be made official after the changes are put into the document, all the changes we discussed today. So glad that everybody were on the same page. Again, lots of work went into this, and all the way up to today, making the final adjustments and making sure we're on the same page, and we like what we proposed. So I'm excited, like everybody said, about the depth of the document, all the great thoughts and analysis that went into it. And ultimately, we have some key recommendations that we can take forward to the agencies as well as to Congress. So very, very exciting, and also great input to the next team that will take this on and continue to fine tune this and go deeper in some other areas, et cetera. So again, thank you everybody for all the hard work. If you get a chance to talk to your working group members, please thank them as well, because they did a lot of the heavy lifting. So pretty exciting with that. Before I turn it over to Jesse sort of for final sort of logistics and next things to think of, David, I think you have your hand up, so go ahead.
Teddy, I just wanted to thank you for all the work that you did. I'm sure that everybody else on here is thinking the same thing. I think you did a great job and handled all of the edits in real time today extremely deftly and very well. And so I just wanted to make sure that at least somebody spoke up, and I guess I am confident I'm speaking for everybody else on this as well.
Great. No, I really appreciate that, David. But again, compared to what everybody else did, that felt like a minor thing and something we could easily get it across the finish line. So thank you. Jesse?
Yeah, thanks, Teddy. And I want to echo everything that David just said. Thank you for all your hard work in bringing everything together in this report. And also just want to take a moment to thank everyone on the task force for their hard work and dedicating your time to this. And again, all the people in the working groups who helped contribute to the report as well. It's a tremendous amount of work you can see and how the group brought everything together, and kind of realizing that all these areas do have some kind of overlap, and so kind of overcoming and kind of figuring out ways to address those challenges in getting the recommendations and a report, kind of everybody on the same page, and taking the time for those additional meetings, which really weren't anticipated at the beginning when we set up the task force, but to be able to take on that extra time, I realize is is a lot of work, and it's very much appreciated on our end. So thank you everyone for that. As Teddy mentioned a little bit about the logistics, the report will get finalized. All the edits that were discussed today will go into the final version. As we're going through, if there's any more little nits or typos or things like that, those can go in the document. So if you happen to see something and want to send a quick email, just to let us know there's some other edit formatting, just let us know. Not too late to do that. We can get that in. The report will be sent to, as Teddy said, the chair of the FCC and the Secretary of Agriculture. And then it'll be posted on the website and available for the public to see. So thank you again for all your hard work. And I think that's what I wanted to say. This is the final meeting for this initial term of the task force, and looking forward to things going ahead in the future. So again, thank you everyone for your time, and it's been really great to see how the report and the recommendations have come together. Also want to thank all the FCC staff and the USDA staff that helped with the task force, the FCC liaisons, the USDA liaisons, and all the USDA staff, as well as Stacy and Elizabeth for all their hard work as deputy designated federal officers, and Aaron and Celia for their hard work earlier in the task force. So again, just thank you, everybody. This has been really interesting, really educational, and I've learned a ton. So thank you. And I think with that, that wraps up the meeting. So we will adjourn this meeting, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the future. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I think meeting is adjourned. It's been a pleasure working with everyone. So we'll see. I'm sure we'll see each other in the future. Take care.
Thank you.